Hi, everyone. Welcome. Those that are already on, I'm sorry, you're going to hear me introduce our friend Katie Norris again. But now that we're recording, I want to make sure that everyone who goes back and listens is able to hear a little bit about Katie. So, Kendal at Home and myself, we're very grateful to have our special guest here today, Katie Norris. She is a cognitive expert, and she's here to talk to us today about things we can all do to keep our brains healthy and active, things that can potentially stave off a dementia diagnosis. So Katie Norris helps care partners in dementia live well together on their journey with dementia and helps all people live a brain healthy life. She is a Montessori dementia care practitioner and a certified brain health coach with certifications in functional fitness, mobility, and the neurology of movement, as well as a Unitarian Universalist community minister. So she has been working in the field of dementia care for over 12 years now. I think I saw on your website it might be even up to 13 or more at this point, and added brain health to her work because of how important she believes, and we all really truly believe very strongly at Kendal at Home, how important it is to lead a brain healthy lifestyle to lead to better aging and reducing the risk of dementia. Kendal actually has connections with Katie going back some years as she served on our Kendal at Home board for 6 years, ending in 2016. We are very thankful that Katie is giving of her time today and her knowledge to speak with all of us and educate us on the topic of brain health. So now I will pass the floor to you, Katie. Thank you again for being here today.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here and to talk about brain health. I know when people are like, what's one thing you talk about? I could either talk about dementia or brain health forever. So, and I have Kendal has a special place in my heart because my parents joined Kendal. What did we find out like back in 2008, something like that?
I believe so. It's been quite a few years.
In the very beginning, and
Yes.
Our life would not be the same. Caring for mom would not have gone well at all if we didn't have you all. So, I just love everything that you all do and how much you've been helping people. And so I'm excited to talk to you all. And I also run the support group for care partners of people that have cognitive decline as well at Kendal. So if you ever need to hop on over there, we meet once a month and they are a fantastic, like the nicest, most supportive group of people in the world. And so I love running that. And so, today we're going to talk about kind of like optimizing your brain health. You're going to get a little rundown. If these were the things you could do every day, fits on one page in the end. That you can work on to help support your brain health. Now, obviously, we're not saying that you can cure anything or stuff like that, but we do know that dementia or cognitive decline, while there are some genetic factors, most of it, about 80% of it, not only if you get it, but when you get it, like if you do have really strong genes, you could delay the onset with a lot of lifestyle interventions. So the lifestyle stuff matters more. And so we're going to talk about the lifestyle stuff that you probably have agency over every day. And then there's other lifestyle things that you probably know about, like if you had chronic like concussions a lot before or gotten a brain injury and things like that. It's also technically a lifestyle factor, but probably not one that you could have not had happen. So we're going to talk about the stuff that you do have agency over in your life now. And some of the stuff I'm hoping you'll be like, I haven't heard that before. I have gotten a million certifications and things because like my mom had Lewy body dementia. And then we know that a lot of symptoms of dementia show up early. Interestingly, with some of the viruses that have been going around, we know that you could lose your sense of smell. A lot of people do start to lose their sense of smell early. They start to have balance problems early, and you'll start to see symptoms 10 to 15 years before diagnosis. But also, not even just dementia, our daily life at any age can be impacted. Like if kids are sleep deprived, they can't function. Teenagers get in a higher rate of car accidents because they don't sleep. And that affects their brain's ability to function. So this kind of stuff matters to all of us for just our daily living. And I think, Cheryl, you said people can write questions in the chat? Is that
Yes, if
okay?
anyone listening in today would want to, as Katie presents for us today, put any questions you have in the chat for the Q&A. I know Katie will be gladly to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah. I'll probably answer them at the end, just because for my brain, and this is one of the things like I like to normalize, is that people know what works for their brain. I do have some learning disabilities and things. If I have to switch back and forth between the two, I'll get lost. So I usually do questions at the end so that I don't get lost and, go all over the place. So
Completely understandable, Katie. I think I'm the same way, if not very similar to you. So
I'm always surprised people can go back and forth, but that's not my life. All right, so I'm going to share my screen so that hopefully this will work. You can probably see I have a million tabs open all the time, and I'm going to present this. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. Okay. Cheryl,
looks
can you
good,
see
Katie?
that? It looks good.
I
Okay.
can definitely see it.
All right. So we're going to talk about optimizing your brain today. Yay. One of my favorite things. And whoops, is it going to go to the side? There we go. All right. So you already know about me. My email is here at the bottom, but also you're going to get a PDF from Cheryl that has my information in it, should you need anything. So I don't need to review all of that. And we're going to kind of talk about a daily brain health plan in supporting diet, movement, sleep, neurological support, and social connection. And that the small changes that you can do in each of these areas to help improve your cognition, function, emotional stability, and all those kinds of good things. And there's 3 keys. There's so many keys to brain health, but I tried to condense that when we're doing any of these things, any of the interventions or supports that we're doing, we're trying to do one or all of these 3 things. We're trying to decrease inflammation, or we're trying to increase and support neural connections and neuroplasticity in the brain, or we're trying to get some social connection, joy, meaning, and purpose in our life, because all these things are really important to brain health. Fortunately, a lot of these things that we do can kind of overlap each other, and you can, get a lot of these keys just within doing one of the things that we're going to talk about. So I want to talk about normal brain aging. There was an old term called age-related memory loss. That is not considered normal anymore. And I know that some people still talk about that, or we'll say we have senior moments and have forgetfulness. But none of this is really normal brain aging. So even things like chronic pain all the time, or, oh, I'm getting older, so my back hurts all the time, things like that. Pain is also a function of the brain. Partially how often we get injured has to do with our movement. Our movement's controlled by our brain. So all of this stuff is connected. And so it's not really normal to have these issues, but somehow in our culture, we've said that this is normal aging, but it's not really. So what we would like to do is change some lifestyle factors that should hopefully decrease some of this stuff if you're experiencing it, or maybe you won't get it. Can't promise anything, but I don't know why these slides come out like this, because they look fine in the program, but very sorry about that. So what causes some of these issues? I mean, there's so many things, but here are some of the things that kind of contribute to struggling with our brain. But what I also want you to remember is that if your brain is struggling, your body struggles, and vice versa. So we're going to talk a little bit later about improper movement patterns and not having enough input from your environment to your brain can cause stress on your brain and cause you to be a little disoriented, can cause falls, can cause issues with balance. So we're looking at a whole body system here to support your brain function and function in your everyday life. So chronic low-grade brain inflammation is probably it's really the biggest factor that we'll talk about. And most of these things that we're going to do help decrease the risk of having this low-grade brain inflammation. And then also as we said, improper movement patterns and things, chronic stress, sleep issues, all of this kind of stuff can affect how our brain functions on a daily basis. Some people I have had just have severe issues with changes in their cognition and different things. And it was really that their sleep habits were off. So it's not always that you need to change some major thing, like everything in your life. Sometimes it's just one change that can really help you function better. Sleep is huge, so we're going to talk about that. So I just want to talk about the problem with inflammation. This is a lot of words on the screen. So it's when I talk about inflammation, I'm not talking about if you were to get an MRI or a CT scan because you have acute encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. This is more like low grade. There really is not a test to look at just low grade inflammation only in your brain. What doctors typically do will look at systemic inflammation markers like C-reactive protein and things like that. Will they do it? It's, not all of them will, but in the research studies, that's kind of really what they're talking about when people are talking about kind of this lower grade chronic brain inflammation. And most of the time you'll see it as symptoms, but they, you can have gut symptoms and you can have brain symptoms. You could even have things like eczema and things like that if you're having some sort of systemic inflammation that probably also is affecting your brain. And it's been found to be a leading contributor to, we don't know about cause, but it does contribute to Alzheimer's and other dementias, other types of cognitive decline, troubles with learning and memory, inability for the brain to move your body correctly, and also emotional dysregulation. And so we're going to talk a little bit about all these things that can contribute to brain inflammation. And part of that is going to be that we're going to talk about diet and inflammatory foods because you have a blood-brain barrier. So your gut, this is a very simplified version, digests all your food and everything, but it has a really strong gut lining that prevents any kind of toxins or particles that the body doesn't want to go from the gut to the rest into your blood. If it goes into your blood, then it also travels to your brain. When somebody's eating a lot of inflammatory foods or even if you're under a lot of stress, even a lot of stress can affect your gut and then maybe weaken the lining of your gut. So, or if your bacteria in your gut is off, it's kind of all related. That can weaken the blood-brain barrier. And then you start to get some inflammation in the brain because inflammatory things have crossed from your blood to your brain. And so we're going to talk about that, but then there's a whole bunch of other things that contribute to chronic inflammation stress on the brain, like sleep, stress, and your other things in your environment. They have found that markers of gut inflammation are higher in people with severe mental illness, Parkinson's, and cognitive decline than they are in healthy people. And that doesn't mean that someone actually has any gut symptoms necessarily. So that's always been really interesting coming out in the research that, somebody may not be having a whole bunch of gut issues, but their gut still may be having a large amount of inflammation. And then that usually means that there's also some brain inflammation. So some much better studies coming out about that now. So the first thing, I put these kind of in order of, if I was going to give you the things to kind of do in order where you're either going to, where you're going to get kind of the most bang for your buck, I would look at your sleep first. Because it's extremely important for your brain health and for your functioning. And you want about 7 to 8 hours a night. And I don't know about you, but sometimes that's very difficult. And also this becomes more difficult as we age. That is not normal aging, but you'll see some of the reasons why it becomes more difficult. So a lot of that is because our circadian rhythm is off, and the way that we live doesn't trigger the brain to have the correct circadian rhythm, so we sleep. But sleep's really important because it's when we store learning and memory. It's when we process stress. It's when we process trauma. And amyloid plaques are cleared as we sleep. So just a quick note on that. I don't know if you saw recently the information that the amyloid hypothesis, the study that was done that said amyloid causes Alzheimer's, was found to be fraudulent this year. And so the interesting thing is that most people who work on improving inflammation to help improve cognition has said forever that it's not that amyloid really causes dementia, but we see higher levels of amyloid because there's a lot of inflammation. Amyloid comes in to help fight inflammation in the brain, and that amyloid is cleared as we're sleeping. So that's when your brain like restores and repairs itself. So there's lots of people in the world who have amyloid and don't have any cognitive decline. And kids get it because if they had a really stressful day or they ate something that wasn't great, they're going to get a little bit of inflammation. Amyloid's going to come try to protect. You're going to sleep. It's going to clear, repair, and then they can function well the next day. So there's lots of reasons why sleep is very important, not only for your brain, but for your immunity, also to regulate eating. And we're going to talk about a little bit about carbohydrate consumption and insulin resistance with brain health in a minute. So it's one of the best things you can do for your brain and body. And I usually start there with people. So I want to give you a few tips to improve that. I'm not going to go over all of this because you'll have the recordings, so you can read these, but basically you have 4 phases of sleep and you need all of them. And a lot of times, if we don't get a long enough chunk of sleep, we don't get all 4, or if we're waking up a lot, we don't get all 4. And so it's really important because if you notice, like deep sleep is physically restorative, but REM sleep is mentally restorative. So it's different. You need to go through all of these phases. And if you're waking up all the time or not sleeping long enough, you won't be able to get through all of them. And then there's also the importance of your circadian rhythm, which you probably heard of this. It's your 24-hour internal clock. That light in the morning triggers the sleep hormone melatonin to decrease, and then the hormone cortisol, which isn't bad in normal amounts. It's just if you're too stressed, you have too much of it, causes you to increase and has you wake up. And then changes in light during the day decrease that cortisol and then increase melatonin to help us fall asleep. And we're going to talk about how that can get really dysregulated in the environment we live in now. Your circadian rhythm also regulates like body temperature, blood pressure, breathing, muscles. So that's why when people are sleep deprived, I don't know if there's a game show from a few years ago that basically it's called Awake. It's so rough to watch what happens to people when they've been sleep deprived for a really long time. And people start to shake, their body temperature isn't regulated. So it's important for general health. So your first step is to get rid of blue light. And because this type of light tells your brain that it's daylight. And so it will, if you are in front of TVs, computers, lights in your house, phones, your brain thinks it's still daytime. And so it does not decrease cortisol and increase melatonin. It's one of the biggest reasons why people can't sleep. So if you, and I know that some people sleep with the TV on, so you might want to switch to a noisemaker or a white noise, something like that. Instead, the light from the TV is a big problem. So if you can turn off all that stuff at least an hour or 2 before bed, that's great. You can wear blue light blocking glasses if it's safe for you. They are amber colored tinted glasses. There are some that you can use during the day. I'm pretty sure these have it. They cut down on the light a little bit, but you actually don't want to wear those all day because then your brain doesn't get enough blue light. So it's a little iffy, but if you're working a computer a long time, you want to wear them when you're working on a computer. But these other lights are usually a dark amber color you can find on Amazon or anywhere. And you can wear those if you have to have a whole bunch of stuff light on at night and you can't really turn on better lighting and get rid of the blue light. And wearing an eye mask when you sleep, if that's safe for you, is really good because it'll cut out all the extra light. If you have clocks in your room, your phone charger, all those kinds of fun things that keep us up a little bit. This is the wrong, you'll see why there's a drink in another one, but anyways. Okay, so the other thing to set your circadian rhythm is to try and get sunlight for 10 to 15 minutes soon after you wake up, again, because this signals to your brain that it's time for your cortisol to rise, and then it helps create this rhythm throughout the day. You can get a light, a sunlight lamp at home, because I know in Cleveland it is cold, cold, cold in the winter. So you can get a sunlight lamp, again, off of Amazon. Verilux is a really trusted company that you can turn on for 15 minutes during the day if you can't get outside. You want a consistent sleep schedule. So go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. Don't be like super stickler about it, but you don't want to go to bed and wake up like, 2 hours later, 3 days a week, and 2 hours earlier the other days. Try and keep it a little bit consistent around the hours. Because again, that sets your rhythm correctly. And then no alcohol or caffeine within 3 to 6 hours before bed. If you do this consistently, maybe like try not doing it one day or cut down on the hours. I know a lot of people do this, but alcohol is actually a sedative, but being sedated is not the same thing as being asleep. So sedation does not allow the body and brain to go through all 4 phases of sleep. And so your brain will not recover overnight, and neither will your body. So it's just remember that sedation is not sleep. And then alcohol sedates you, but doesn't have you go to sleep. And caffeine for most people decreases sleep by an hour. I know for some people it doesn't really seem to affect them. So, go with what works for you, but for most people, it tends to decrease your sleep by an hour. Okay, and then we're going to talk about diet. In that one slide that I showed before of the body, and then I had how, inflammatory foods can kind of cause some issues for the gut, and that can cause some toxins and particles to cross the blood-brain barrier. That's why diet's really important. One of the reasons why. And so some people aren't really, some of us are more sensitive to things like grains or gluten or even legumes, so beans and things like that. All of those things they're plants, they have a very small amount of natural toxins in them, because in nature, an animal's supposed to eat a seed or a plant. It's supposed to go out the way it came in so it can grow somewhere else. So there's a little bit of a toxic coating on the outside of those. And so for some of us, it's just really irritating to our gut, and for others, it's not very much. But the most common ones that are pretty irritating is dairy for a lot of people, and gluten. So we tend to kind of look at reducing some of those inflammatory foods. And that can be with the 2 diets that have been really well studied with brain health are, interestingly, so Mediterranean does have more grains, but it also controls for a lot of these other factors, and it's a whole foods diet and gets a lot of your micronutrients. And a paleo diet, if you really know that you kind of probably have a lot of issues with inflammation, a paleo diet does take out grains, dairy, and legumes, so beans and things like that. So kind of want to work on finding out what's a low inflammatory diet for you. And then also, we don't want it to be too high in carbohydrates, and even the recommended daily amount of carbohydrates for many people is too high. But Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes colloquially by many doctors because of this issue with insulin resistance. People can have insulin resistance, which is when their body doesn't use insulin, like the cells won't take insulin anymore, and you'll see like a spike in glucose. But many people have it even though their A1C and their fasting glucose are fine. So this isn't a huge deal. You just cut down the amount of carbs that you eat every day instead of eating a really high, very carb heavy standard American diet. And then that's it. So we'll talk about that in a second. So your first tip, and you'll get a sheet of these, is to decrease inflammatory foods. And the foods that are most likely to lead to inflammation are refined starches, refined and artificial trans fats, and high, like if it was really high, saturated fat is good. It's a healthy fat, like olive oil, coconut oil, all that kind of stuff. The times where it becomes, any types of fat become a problem is if you eat it with a lot of carbs. And so that's why they're now recommending to cut down the amount of carbs that you eat. So the grains and things like that, a lot of times are like wheat, corn, oats, legumes, lentils, dairy. Those things tend to be a little bit more inflammatory for a lot of people. So I often recommend a paleo diet because it removes most of those foods, but also another good, and it's also a little bit lower carbohydrate. So you want to keep your carbohydrates to like a quarter cup at each meal. And that includes like potato, sweet potato. That doesn't really fall into veggie category. That falls into like starch carb category because they're high in sugar. So if you're really struggling, often people do really well if they decrease wheat and dairy for like a month and see how it goes. And then you introduce one of those back in for 2 weeks, see how you feel. And then you can try the other one 2 weeks after that and see how you feel. So the one good thing is that most of the inflammatory foods are also high in carbohydrates. So if you decrease the inflammatory foods, you're already going to eat lower carbohydrate. I don't mean like low carb. I just mean lower than the standard American diet. And that's because of insulin resistance that we talked about a little bit before. And we want to make sure that we don't become insulin resistant. And it's estimated that about 60% of people are insulin resistant, but it doesn't, but they have normal A1C and fasting glucose levels. So your brain plasticity is regulated in part by insulin, and the ability to use glucose for the brain is one type of fuel, but also people who have some of the genetic markers like I do for Alzheimer's, we have our body struggles with using glucose as fuel. So sometimes we tend to need to eat a lower carbohydrate diet. So we're using ketones for fuel, and that's all kind of stuff you'd want to work a little bit more closely on with a doctor. But in general, for a lot of people, it helps their brain health to moderate carbs a little bit. So you're not getting insulin resistance and higher inflammatory markers. So I usually just say a quarter cup per meal is an easy guideline. And then you're going to get this little visual of your brain healthy plate and healthy fats and things like that for the brain, like fish and some coconut oil, some olive oil, and lots of colorful veggies. And the other good thing for your diet is if you can add in a probiotic, because it does help improve leaky gut and prevent inflammation. And they've seen pro-inflammatory cytokine markers go down when people are taking probiotics. And I don't know why this is so cut here, but I'll make sure that you get the 3 types of probiotics that are you want in a strain. Cheryl, for you, is the bottom of these cut off like that? It's very weird.
Katie, what I see, the bottom there, I saw number 1.
Okay.
Lactobacillus is the bottom, is the furthest down that I see.
Cut off. Let me see. So it is cut off here. That's weird. It was not earlier. Let me just, I think I can fix this so that when it's recorded, you all actually see these.
Thank you, Katie. Again, technology, as you were talking about earlier, you just never
I
know.
know, I don't understand why.
What issue is going to pop up?
Yeah. So there's going to be what am I thinking? A handout that you'll all get. And I do have a link to a place that has a triple strain probiotic, but in most research studies, they use all 3, some combination of these 3, they're actually categories of probiotics. And so you could take 3 different ones. Some of them have them all in together and stuff. And so any good probiotic is better than nothing, but if you're going to, shop around, it's good to try and get those 3. All right. So hopefully that isn't the recording. And then we're going to talk about movement. I bet you all have heard about movement 1,000 times because Kendal has some really great resources, which I've also put on a list for you of things that you want to make, you can utilize from Kendal that help fulfill a lot of these categories. Because we all know that movement brings oxygen to the brain, helps it function better. It increases the feel-good hormones. Strength training decreases fall risk because it builds muscle, but also keeps that connection between our body and our brain going. And gait changes in the way we walk are early indicators of dementia. You could get gait changes for other reasons too, but it usually does mean something's up either with the way your body is moving because of posture or issues with your mobility, and or because there might be some neurological stuff that's going on. And that could be vision and lots of different things. And I'm going to give you a few vision things to do as well. It's just all the great things about movement and why it's important. And it does increase BDNF, which is an anti-inflammatory marker. So it's good to have more of that. So one thing is you want cardiovascular movement. You probably know this, 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week. If a few times you can do it a little bit faster, even if it's just like 5 minutes, that's good. It's kind of 2 different types of cardiovascular movement that you need. And if you want to mix it up and do a different cardiovascular movement than you've done before, then you fulfill the learning new things kind of thing that we're going to talk about later. So try, and a moderate pace means that you could talk to somebody next to you 2 or 3 sentences at a time, but it's not like you could just chit chat for an hour or, long paragraphs. So something around that intensity. And then you want strength training with proper movement form about 2 times a week. And this is where Kendal has really, really, really good resources for you all, not only with the personal trainer that could come into the home and help you figure out, check your movement patterns, make sure that they're okay, and also kind of give you a program. But there are online movement and mobility programs for you all to do. I know there's like Movement Monday and there's the Spiral 100. So there's lots of options. You just want to make sure that you're doing these movements correctly. So I really do recommend talking to a personal trainer. Like right here, I'm hinging. This would be what you would do to pick up keys off the ground, but most people don't hinge like that. Their back is all rounded and they're kind of pitched forward, and that's when we fall a lot. So we want to work on all of these functional movements of life in the correct form so that when we're just running around in everyday life, we're safer. And one of the things that's been a really good indicator of longevity is your grip strength. A lot of times they test that as how long could you hang from a bar from, but there's tons of other ways to increase your grip strength. And a trainer can help you do that, but it is a really good indicator for longevity and decrease and all-cause mortality as well. So when you find a trainer, talk to them about what are the ways that you can help improve that. So mostly it's the cardio and strength that's really important. And oops, where'd I go? And mobility, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. Kind of falls under neurological support too. So your brain performs not only your cognitive functions like learning, memory, all that kind of stuff, but it also controls the movement of your body, your vision, your balance. And as you probably know, when you don't use neurons, we lose them. That doesn't mean you lose them because you're aging. It's just called synaptic pruning. When we're born, we have a whole bunch of synapses. And then as we learn things, the brain is like, okay, I'm going to be efficient. I'm just going to prune away the things that I don't need anymore. That's why it's harder to learn new things as we get older than it is when we're younger, because we don't have as much of that synaptic going on in our brain. So we want to keep learning new things and not just doing the same things we've always done, because we want to increase the brain wiring and those synapses in our brain and not, kind of let the brain prune so much of the things away. So we want to maintain neural connections, basically. So your first thing is to learn new things. I don't want you to stop doing things that you love, but people will say to me, well, I've done crossword puzzles my whole life. Why isn't because there was this thing going around that doing crossword puzzles helped your brain. Not that it doesn't, doing anything new and learning things always helps your brain. But when our brain learns something, it's got all this flurry of activity while it's learning. Then it automates most of what we do to make it easier, because the brain is always conserving energy. And so once we learn something new and it's kind of become habit for us and the brain really knows how to do it, that activity and that blood flow to the brain stuff decreases because it doesn't need it anymore. It's automated it now. And so that's why you want to learn new things, because you want to periodically increase that surge of neuronal activity and wiring in the brain. So try to do some new things. And I know that Kendal also has the learning platform where you can learn a whole bunch of new stuff, whatever you're interested in. And so that's why I'll say, even with exercise, maybe do something a little bit different, because that's also with exercise. If you're always a runner, that's very different neurological connection and movement pattern than if you were to also lift weights or swim or do something else. And you want to keep kind of all of that stuff going. So another reason it's important to learn new things. So a couple times a week, at least, spend some time learning something new. And then with the neurological support, you want to support your body map. There's this, think of it like a GPS in our brain of our body. And it's what allows us to keep one of the things, because your inner ear also allows you to keep balance, but know where your body is in space. It's called proprioception. Know how far away things are from you. That's why when we put something on a table, it shouldn't fall off. And the way we live, though, has severely decreased the neural input from the environment to our brain. And one of the biggest things is shoes. I could talk about this forever, but I won't. Most shoes are very thick, and they all, even shoes that look flat, have an internal heel of about 1/2 inch, which means your weight is pitched forward, your balance is off, your inner ear is off, changes your vision. And also then people can't flex their toe or their ankle enough to walk correctly. And that's why we start to see falls and gait issues really, really early. Not only because we've lost the mobility of our ankle and foot to move correctly, but then your brain isn't feeling the ground. And so it's kind of lost the neural connection between your brain and your feet. Again, if you don't use those connections, you lose them. The brain just kind of shuts it off because it thinks it doesn't need it. So one of the things there's 2 things that I recommend people start with is, if it's safe for you to walk barefoot at home in your house, to do that as much as possible, because it can help restore the proper movement of your foot with your ankle. So many things need to move right in your foot, but it can be really helpful. So if it's safe for you to walk barefoot in your home, that's a great thing to do. And I count this in as like some daily mobility work. And then you should be able to bend your big toe to 90 degrees, because when you walk, you need to be able to push off on your big toe so that your foot goes straight. It doesn't turn out to the one right here. If your foot goes straight, it won't turn out to the side or kick back. Or sometimes you'll see people walk with their legs crossing or with their leg going out to the side like this. People drag their toe. One reason people drag their toe is because we've lost the neural connection to our foot. The foot can't tell where it is in relation to the ground. And so you'll start to get a toe drag, all these things. So I often tell people to start making sure that they can have a 90-degree toe bend. And if you don't have it, you want to sit with your shoes off in a chair where your feet can be flat on the floor, and you want to lift up one heel and come up onto your big toe. Don't roll out onto your pinky toes, but you're going to come up on your big toe just as far as you feel a tiny stretch. And for some people, it's not very far. And you want to work on that every other day with just like 10 repetitions per one foot and 10 for the other. It's really tiring. If you don't have that toe bend, you'll feel it. So you just want to do light stretch and let it go. I know these seem like tiny things, but they make a huge difference in somebody's ability to function, because when our body doesn't know when our brain doesn't know where our body is in space, it's under a chronic amount of stress assessing the environment for what's safe or not, because it can't feel what's happening. So it feels less safe. And so you have a higher level of chronic stress throughout the day when your brain isn't moving, when your brain doesn't have a good enough connection with your body so it can move safely through its environment. And these are 2 things that are wildly so helpful for people that I recommend it to everybody. So, and then I'm going to show you 2 really simple vision drills. So if you wear glasses like me, it's very likely that you don't use your peripheral vision, because if we did, I can't see because I can't see. I need glasses to see far away. And you also have a frame right here. So our vision tends to be like this way, but your eyes have 6 muscles, and they should be able to move every way, up, down, and they should be able to converge and diverge. So, but most of the way that we live our life doesn't require us to kind of practice that kind of stuff. And then especially if we use glasses, that can also limit it a little bit. So for a lot of people, I work on a couple vision drills so that you start to get more normal range of motion in your eyes, so that your brain can assess your environment more accurately. And this helps a lot with depth perception. And, I noticed I had a problem when I started like clipping the curb a lot with my car. And these are some of the things that help me with that. So it's really common that we start to lose the muscle range in our eyes just because of the way that we live. So these help with that. This is really easy. Toss a tennis ball from your right hand to your left hand. It sounds so dumb, but you can look at it at first and then try and toss it and don't look at it and do all these things seated, right? So if you're tossing it and not looking at it, then you're using a little bit more of your peripheral vision. If you're tossing it and looking at it, then you're look at it without moving your head. Then you're using more of the muscles of your eye. So super simple, but it's really helpful. And do that a couple times a week for a minute or so. If any of these things make you dizzy though, and I'll show you this next, then you should go to a neurologist who can refer you to a vestibular rehabilitation therapist. And then your other vision drill is these, we call them eye saccades, because your eyes need to be able to move smoothly from one side to the other without moving your head. And I'm going to show you an example of this, but you basically put 2 Post-it notes on your wall and you're going to sit 3 to 4 feet away, and the Post-it note should be about 12 inches apart. And you're going to look forward and you're going to look at one Post-it note with just your eyes. And then you're going to slowly go to the other one. And then you're going to go back and forth. And we're going to test it in a minute. 30 seconds to maybe a minute, 2 to 3 days a week. Again, if it makes you dizzy at all, try it slower, always start these seated. But if it does make you dizzy, you probably need to get it checked out. And this is what it's going to look like on your wall. So you're just going to put a Post-it note on either side. And so go ahead and look at the middle of this screen where it's white and slowly move your eyes to the, what is that? The left, which is green. And then slowly move it to the blue. And then slowly move it to the green. And slowly move it to the blue. And that's all you do. And that's really great for helping maintain the neural connection between your eyes, the muscles of your eyes, and can really help with the brain and body knowing where it is in space. And your last thing is social connection. It decreases all-cause mortality. It's so good for you. Obviously, we know it decreases depression, anxiety, isolation, and social visits support our neural connections. Our brain is processing a lot, lots usually going on. A lot of times combine this with something with you're learning a new thing, exercising, something like that, reading, doing a book group, things like that, so that you have strong social connections, which I know has been really difficult, even post-COVID, because I know a lot of us, when there's like surges and stuff, we don't always go out with people and everything. And so calls, Zoom calls, a lot of the events that Kendal has that are also available on Zoom, but try to phone a friend or something every day, talk to your loved ones, do something with your friends, learn something new with other people. Online learning things a lot of times have like group online learning, which are a good option if you can't leave the house and stuff. So it's social connection is so important, which I think that we all know, but I always put it in here because life gets really hectic, and now with like COVID and stuff, very scary. And so it's a good reminder to find little ways to add in social connection. So we're going to go to questions in a second, but these are the 2 documents you're going to get. One is this little daily brain health plan that you can put on your fridge or wherever you want, that just reminds you of what you should do each day, each week, with some tips. And then the other one is a resources list. So I put down a lot of the Kendal supports that are around, some additional supports like Whole Foods has some pre-made meals. That's like my go-to. If I'm like, cooking is beyond my ability today, you have my information. And then I did have a link to the one of the triple therapy probiotics that I know and like, and I know have been tested really well. And then some of the references from the slides and things like that. So if you like to go look at research articles, you have those. feel like I just talked forever. I'm going to escape this and see, and then we can chat, ask questions. I just can't remember how to stop. There we go. Stop the screen share. Okay. So
Thank you, Katie. That was so much
I know
interesting material.
I want to tell everybody everything, so it gets a
I'm the
little
same exact way.
sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone watching, please don't hesitate to come on the chat, jump in the Q&A, give a question to Katie.
I have a question, Katie.
Yeah.
I love all your information about diet, because I think diet is so important to our brain and to our overall health. I do know a lot of people who take probiotics. I myself take and drink a kombucha every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you feel about that. I know some people say that it has a lot of sugar and it's not as good for you, but what's your thoughts on kombucha?
Well, we used to brew kombucha at our home, so love it. Our thing died when we moved to Texas. So it's fine. Just you want to buy one that is less, doesn't have as much juice added to it. So I usually go for like something that's like 10 grams of carbs or less, and those are kind of hard to find. The Kavita brand has some.
Okay.
The thing is, so the other thing I probably should have said, I'm a ghostwriter for a functional medicine clinic. So I fortunately have boatloads of research available at my fingertips. And one of the things is that they really looked at how much probiotics can you get just from probiotic foods. And while they're important to add in for lots of different things, because you also get a lot of like the good fiber and stuff like that. If you've got gut dysbiosis, just the foods won't be enough. You'd have to drink a whole bunch of kombucha, and at that point, then you probably have a bellyache to get enough. So probiotic with probiotic foods is a good combo.
Okay, great. I would appreciate that handout too, Cheryl. If you can.
Of course, Terry.
Yeah.
We can definitely send that your way. And it's interesting. The probiotic is one thing I wrote down too, Terry, because I feel like I see so many of those commercials about these yogurts you can try to get probiotics. And in my brain, I'm thinking, well, I'm getting the probiotics I need because I'm having this yogurt. Yeah. Katie, I don't know if that is, I mean, maybe for younger adults or even older adults, if the yogurt would be enough.
So none of them quite have enough. You need a pretty high strain, because your gut acid also kind of kills off some stuff, and you really needed to kind of like get in there. They're also usually really high in sugar, but the ones that are low sugar have the fake sugar that's really not good for our brain and actually does increase inflammatory markers like aspartame and stuff like that. So if it's like monk fruit sugar, but there's very little actual yogurts and stuff that have that. But a lot of times they do probiotics and fiber, which could be good. But if you have gut dysbiosis, largely increasing your fiber right away can make you very sick. So you want to increase your fiber slowly so that your gut bacteria can, repopulate, and actually you have enough of that gut bacteria to break down the fiber so you don't get all of the uncomfortable stomach problems. So it's a little bit of a playing around with kind of what works for you, but usually most of those don't have enough probiotics in them on their own.
I'm not surprised. My mother always said, Cheryl, those yogurts, it's too much sugar. Move away from those yogurts.
They're
so I'm not
very high
surprised
sugar,
by your comment.
Moms, they're always right.
Yeah. I have another question, and I hate to take up or ask all the questions, but what is your take on chia? I've been taking chia now after one of our members actually suggested it to me, because she said it's really good. It sort of regulates her blood sugar and also is a good cholesterol reducing and also natural.
Yeah, for some people, they do really great on chia. Again, it is very high in fiber though. So if you have gut problems, you may eat chia and get really sick. So it really just depends on the person. But in general, it is a really good thing to add in. You can do like the chia puddings. Some people notice that they'll do better if they put the chia in something and it blooms and expands, rather than taking chia plain, grinding it up and putting it in something, because then it hasn't expanded yet, which is interesting. It's a little bit different on the stomach. So one goes into your stomach a little bit more processed. So when you see those chia puddings where you can see the whole chia ball, some people do a little bit better with that. And with all these things, just start them off at, I think a lot of times, sometimes we have a tendency to be like, I'm going to put chia like in 3 different things this day. And then people kind of get a little iffy. It's just because it's new and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So start off lower, but it is really great. It does for some people help regulate blood sugar. Cinnamon also is really great for that. And there's this Harney and Sons has a cinnamon tea that has helped a lot of people just with regulating blood sugar. It tastes really good. I'm convinced there's something else in it that I'm not sure, but because it tastes too good. I actually wear a continuous glucose monitor to monitor mine, even though I don't have diagnosed diabetes, but because my insulin resistance kind of stuff has been off, and I notice my brain function is worse depending on what I eat, that my doctor prescribed one of those for me. So there's a lot of cool research now coming out from people who are wearing those that I think is going to be helpful in the future to kind of help people know that blood glucose regulation is a little bit different for everybody and how to figure out what works for you. So,
Are you a proponent of intermittent fasting?
love it. Didn't go into it, but yes, it is actually better to not eat for most people 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. If you go to bed when you're trying to digest your food, it interrupts your sleep and your gut needs a break. If we're always giving it stuff, it's always working and it doesn't have time to repair its stuff if there's always stuff in there and it's always working. So intermittent fasting is really great. And I noticed that my resting heart rate improves and things like that when I intermittent fast, and can function better. So it can be really helpful.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for all your knowledge. Very interesting. And I too, I have a family member who has dementia. So I think about that often, how I can change environmental things for me to sort of support my brain as I age.
Yeah, it's really important. And I think, we're fortunately now starting to get more research. I know lifestyle factors are not funded in research very well, which is a bummer. But I think we're getting more of it and it's going to be really helpful because there are so many of us that do have family members with it. And if we could even delay the onset or live better with it because our brain didn't have to get as bad as it, could have gotten is always helpful.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Katie. I did want to say you had commented. I hope this might be a lot of information, maybe bits and pieces that we've heard before. Hope you find at least one really new thing. The vision drills, I wanted to say, I don't think I've ever heard of anything like that, but it makes sense.
Gosh.
And I really appreciated that. I think for anyone, sounds
they're
like
so
great.
Helpful. I started doing them with athletes. I had teenagers that I didn't realize their peripheral vision was so bad.
Really?
And that stuff starts when we're young and we don't know it's happening because of just the way we live doesn't really require us to do a lot of this stuff. So, functional neurology is awesome, but it's so helpful. I thought that I was, that I had permanent vertigo and I do not. It's a vision problem and stuff. So it's really interesting, I think. Cool stuff.
Lots of cool stuff. Thank you so much, Katie. Well, if you have any other questions or anything else, Katie, that's jumping in your mind that you might want to share with us today, I really thank you for all this information. And as Sue was on here, she's recording us today. So this will be available through the Kendal at Home portal. If you want to go back and say, what did Katie say again about those vision drills? You can go in and see again this presentation. And then as Katie mentioned, that document, we will be getting that out so you can use. I really love that one page. I think I might post it for myself too, as daily little good reminder
Try to get it
what we can do.
Yeah. And if it feels like a lot of things, just pick one thing. One thing you're going to work on, and one thing, I gave you 3 things for sleep, just pick one so that you're not overwhelmed. You'll probably have a good indication when you hear it, or if you're watching it again, oh, that might be the one thing I should work on first, and just, try that. Because the other thing is, we don't want to increase your stress by here's all these things you should change right away, right? That's just going to make your brain not work. So one thing, you have my email. I do, coach people through brain healthy living. So if you want a little bit more help, you can do that as well, or ask me questions if you have some questions you want answers to. So yeah,
All right.
that's it.
Thank you so much, Katie.
You're welcome.
And Terry
Thanks,
said in
everybody.
the chat, thank